Is prenatal screening a problem or a solution for Down syndrome? Firstly, let's define Down syndrome. Down syndrome is a learning disability caused by an extra chromosome known as trisomy 21. People with Down syndrome usually display almond-shaped eyes, a small mouth, a flat back of the head, and display symptoms of floppiness as well as a below-average IQ. There are different types of prenatal screening, which is also known as antenatal diagnosis. They can ultrasound the uterus and the developing fetus. They can take tissue from chromosomes and do biochemical analysis. They can also obtain amniotic fluid for the analysis of chromosomes and enzymes or DNA. A growing number of birth defects and diseases can be diagnosed prenatally and in some cases treated before birth. However, for Down syndrome, they cannot treat this at birth. The prenatal screening is just there for confirmation for the parents. 90% of people in the UK who have prenatal screening and have a positive test for Down syndrome have an abortion. This is reflected in wider society with 100% in Finland. But 1 in 3 of women still decide to reject the option of prenatal screening. But why is the abortion rate so high in Western society? With Down syndrome tend to have an IQ on average of around 50. This can cause them to develop slower intellectually, thus increasing the likelihood of them needing extra help at school. Specialist schools may not be available in certain areas, and public schools may not be able to adequately cater for their needs. 1 in 10 children with Down syndrome also have other conditions such as autism and ADHD, and while some of these can be manageable, others can be more severe. Around half of children born with Down syndrome are born with a congenital heart defect. This is where the heart doesn't fuse together properly and causes a multitude of different problems. 30 to 35% of children with this problem die. In a recent study, it was found that in the learning difficulties population, there was a 24% rate of hearing loss, which is around 1.4 times higher than the general population. The highest prevalence of hearing loss was in the Down syndrome community. So what are the positives of Down syndrome? Well, Down syndrome individuals increase the diversity in our culture, and in modern society, shouldn't we strive to be the most diverse culture possible? Also, putting a label on Down syndrome as being bad makes us no different from the society of the 1960s that made black people use separate bathrooms. Down syndrome people have a happy disposition and they know no different. So who are we to play God and say they? Sadly, there is an accepted societal norm that Down syndrome is abnormal, leading to discrimination and high abortion rates. This also leads to the idea that Down syndrome people put strains on the education and health systems, and yet other groups in society, such as criminals, put a huge strain on these resources, yet they aren't killed or aborted. Children with Down syndrome deserve a life too, despite learning difficulties, despite the regular health checks and possible birth defects. Doctors are often quick to offer termination as a solution for a positive test of Down syndrome. However, is this really a solution? Ending a life just because they may struggle in mainstream school, just because they look slightly different? The answer is no. It's time for society to remove the ugliness of judgment and start to become more accepting. We've done it before, so why not again? We can learn to become more accepting once we know more about Down syndrome. Screening is not the problem. The views of society and the lack of education about Down syndrome from health services are the problem. It's time for society to become more informed so prenatal screening can be used only in cases where people are 100% sure they've made the right choice.
Whatever you learn today, please remember this. I am a man with Down syndrome, and my life is worth living. That maybe we don't need research concerning Down syndrome. Some people say prenatal screens will identify Down syndrome in the womb, and those pregnancies will just be terminated.
We don't have to justify our lives, so why should they?